My name is Casper Moerck. I work for Siemens. We're a big global engineering company, a conglomerate. We are in almost all major countries in the world, about 60 something I believe, and we have about 350,000 employees, so it's a lot. I work in the learning department. We call ourselves Learning Campus, and I head up learning technologies. I work on those topics both globally, but also here in the region of Americas, and certainly here in the United States where I'm based. So I'm going to be talking about learning technologies today. It's a topic I've been thinking a lot about, not just because of my work, but certainly it's a big piece of what I have to do. But it's an interesting topic, and my experience with it is that it's difficult to keep up. The pace is changing, and I'm trying to do my best, like many of you probably, to figure out what's going to happen here. So that's the inspiration for what I tried to put together for you guys here today. And I think it's relevant. You know, when we came here to the conference, we all got a little goodie bag, and it had sun lotion and a nice power bank for our iPhones and stuff. But it also had a lot of magazines from the different vendors and supporters of the conference here. And I actually took a picture of it. I'm going to send that to my friends to show how much of what's going on in learning today is really about technology, because I think there were 3 or 4 of these magazines that had something about learning technology on the front page. And just for the fun of it, I looked through the rest of them, and all of them had articles or themes of learning technology. So clearly, it's something that's happening within our field these days. So let's dive into it a little bit. Josh Bersin, you may know Bersin. He's a big contributor to our field. He recently said that digital learning technologies should no longer be thought of just as tools. They are really more of a way of learning, and he said it's about bringing learning to where people are and presenting it to them in useful ways. So learning technology has sort of changed its role in relation to that, from being a tool to being a way of learning. And I think that goes for the rest of our lives too. Technology has changed from being tools to being almost an integrated part of the way we live, express ourselves, and engage with each other and the world. So that's a big change, and all of this change is happening quickly. So when we look at how it's summarized by Bersin, all of these changes, we can see that if we go back to the 1990s, the late 90s, we were talking a lot about learning management systems. They were, at that point, still relatively new. They were based on the SCORM technologies and all of that good stuff that we know. We were talking a lot about instructional design at that time. The users, when we talked about those, it was self-study, it was e-learning, that was the new thing. And as we go up to the mid-zeros, we see that we're talking about learning paths, career tracks. The philosophy is one of blended learning. We're realizing that social learning is a big component of successful learning, I would say. We're very career-focused in terms of the users. We try to do role-based and skill-based learning. And LMS really gets elevated and expanded to be more than just a place where we keep records. It becomes more of a talent platform. As we move into the 2010s, we see that the formats change for sure. We get more and more video, we get more and more interaction, we get social and game-based and all these good things. We talk about taxonomies, not just the 70-20-10, but also taxonomies of content. We talk about learning on demand, having learning where you need it to be. The LMS is transforming into an experience system. And I think, as you can see here, that's about where we are right now. We are certainly, as of today, in a transformation where digital learning is really, really big. And digitalization in general is on everyone's mind, not just in learning. My own company, one of our core strategies is really digitalization. So that's where we are right now, I think. We're talking about micro-learning, real-time videos. We're talking about courses being accessible everywhere, right at the point of need. We're talking about design thinking. That's relatively new to me, but I actually think it's really interesting. We're talking about the experience of learning. Our users expect us to have this content ready for us really everywhere, all the time, just when they need it. They want no barriers to it. They want it working as easily as their iPhones do. And so there are lots of challenges on that, of course. The LMS is also changing quite a lot. I think there's a lot happening in the LMS space and also, of course, in the other technologies. And so when we look at where we're going, which is what I'd like to talk more about, we're really talking about intelligent learning, machine-driven learning going forward. So right now, we have a bunch of different learning technology platforms. And so for myself, I wanted to keep up with all of it, figure out what's going on here, what's available, what should we focus on. And like I said, the pace has really sped up. So we have, learning experience platforms. That to me is one category of platforms that we're seeing right now. And that's stuff like Degreed, Edcast, PathGather, SAP Jam, Fuse, and I'm sure you guys could mention a lot more as well. These are interesting to me. I like the way they present content for us. I think that is a look into the future of how we're going to see content presented to the learners as an integrated part of their everyday and more intuitive version of presenting content and learning to our users. Then we have what I call program, experience, and delivery platforms. Intrepid, NovoX, edX, Everwise, OpenEdX. All of these provide experience platforms, but they also deliver content. We have micro-learning platforms. So that's vendors like Axonify, Grovo, QStream, Practice, and many more. And micro-learning, of course, is something we're talking a lot about also at this conference. I think it has to do with how we're beginning to talk about content in terms of macro or micro, and then talking about how in a spaced learning scenario, we place the micro, where do we place the macro? The micro-learning platforms have a future, I think, but it's going to be interesting what's going to happen with all of these platforms, because as you can see, it looks like there are many different platforms. So we're going to have them all, or is one of them going to really dominate the market? That's a good question to me. We also, of course, have assessment, development, and delivery tools, things like video authoring, intelligent assessments, spaced learning. We're looking at virtual reality, augmented reality. That's something I'll get back to talking more about and where I see us going and what my findings of where we are now gives you a clue. Content libraries is, I think, also something we can talk about separately. We have OpenSesame, with what, 25,000 courses. We have Skillsoft, we have Pluralsight, and then I guess we can just go on and talk about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of vendors who now have a full library. LMS platforms, obviously, we've been talking about the LMS for a long time, and we will continue to do so going forward. We have Saba here, obviously Cornerstone, SuccessFactors, we have SumTotal here, we have Oracle, Litmus, and all of these great vendors. And so I think they occupy a category for themselves within the learning technology platform landscape. Finally, a relatively new type of technology is what I would call the learning record stores, where you can basically store everything that you need from any other platform as well. Watershed, Grassblade, Learning Locker, Saltbox, and several other vendors are coming into that space. So to me, that's a little bit of the most interesting technology we're seeing now. This is the landscape as I see it right now in bigger terms. The thing with looking at learning technologies like this is that for me, I feel like I'm always behind. I'm always trying to figure out, well, what is Degree going to do next? What's the next big thing in curation from OpenSesame? Or how is Saba going to improve the learner experience, and so on? So, when I was trying to keep up with the market, trying to stay relevant, in the learning space, I found that just looking at what the vendors do and what the landscape looks like now doesn't really prepare me that well for trying to manage learning technology for my own organization. So what I did a while back is I tried to figure out what are the underlying trends, technologies, and developments that I think will be driving what we already see and what will be driving the future. So I really tried to figure out how does that look for the technologies that we have out there right now and the technologies that are coming. And so I have these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 technologies that I'd like to talk about and try and introduce to you. These were the ones I mostly looked into, and I'm not an expert on any of them, but I know enough to be dangerous about all of them. So I wanted to talk to you about all of these different technologies. So let me start with the next Gen LMS and a little bit about where I think we are going when we talk about learning management systems. And so what I'm reading and what I'm seeing is that there is one prediction that says there will be no LMS of the future. Companies like IBM and a few others have already gone away from the traditional LMS. They simply don't have it anymore. And so the question is, what is going to happen for the LMS of the future? Will it go away? I don't think so. I think there's still space for the LMS, but I do know that it's going to look drastically different than it does today. If I ask you guys, how many of you love your LMS today? I don't see a lot of hands in the air, right? And so it's going to have to look very different. What I think is going to happen is it's going to be integrated into other platforms. So it'll become more or less invisible. It may be integrated into the platforms you're already using. If you're a sales organization, maybe you'll integrate into your sales system, salesforce.com, something like that. It may integrate into your existing intranets, but it will certainly look very different. Beyond that, the LMS market is big. It's about $4 billion of a market. So these players have a lot of influence. They have a lot of capital. They're big companies. They're not these small little startups anymore. And they will have an opportunity really to impact where this market goes. It will be interesting to see which direction they go in. I believe many will try to encapsulate all the other technologies so that they become a one-stop shop. I don't know if they'll be successful in doing that, or if these technologies are going to be too difficult to integrate into one platform. NLP, that's short for natural language processing. So this is basically the idea that a computer will be able to understand spoken and written language. In the beginning, of course, it won't be able to understand it very well, maybe like a child, but as the technology progresses, it basically means a computer will be able to understand what you say, it will be able to read a book, and then it will be able to do things with that understanding to help us out. So examples could be, and some of this is already happening, a computer reads a book, then it makes an executive summary and presents that to you so you don't have to read the whole book. Another one, a computer reads a book, finds out what are the core learning pieces, and then presents that to a learner. A computer reads a book, tests you on it, because it knows what you need to know if you had read that book. So natural language processing, I'm sure, is going to be an interesting technology in the future for the learning world, especially when combined with some of the other technologies. I think we'll see some interesting things, and I'll get back to, if I remember, how natural language processing can be interesting in relation to machine learning and AI. Machine learning is basically the idea that a machine can learn by itself. That's how it was defined as it was developed, and this sort of thought goes back to the 50s and 60s with Alan Turing and all these guys. Whether the machine will actually learn in the ways that we think about learning is questionable, but I think Alan Turing said something like, well, it doesn't matter if it learns, what matters is if it behaves as if it did. So machine learning is a topic of learning under artificial intelligence. The interesting thing for the future, I think, is how that technology is going to be able to support us doing things that we have to do today. That could be things like putting together a curriculum. It could be processing what comes out of a natural language processing piece of technology. So let's say the NLP program will be able to figure out what is a piece of learning from a book. The machine learning element will be able to say, all right, I'm going to present this to Casper because I know that he likes that type of learning, and I can see perhaps in his performance that this is what he needs. AI and machine learning are in many ways very related, and so I won't say that much about it. I'll get back to it when we get to artificial intelligence. Another cool technology that we are already seeing is adaptive learning. So for adaptive learning, it's a little bit, we have a current state and we have a future state. The current state is that we do have adaptive learning, courses that change as you go through them. This is relatively simple to do. It's based on branching logic. So basic algorithms like, if Casper can add 2 plus 2, then I don't need to teach him about addition. Or if Casper cannot multiply 5 times 5, then I will teach him about multiplication. So that kind of basic branching logic is certainly possible today. We see it today, and it's cool today. But going forward, the adaptive technology may become much more advanced, so that you really will get a very, very customized learning experience. And the adaptation will not just be within one piece of learning content. So today, you can take an e-learning course, and that course will have different outcomes for different people. In the future, we can have 100,000 different courses, and the adaptive learning algorithms will take pieces from each course and adapt them into something relevant to you. That could be done in relation to natural language processing. So it doesn't just perhaps take courses or learning content. It may go to YouTube. It may go to the the TED Talks and listen to every single TED Talk ever talked and pick out that one piece that it thinks you need to learn based on intelligent tutoring, cognitive scaffolding, and a lot of other fancy words that I'm just able to say, and I hardly even understand them myself. I think adaptive learning is really cool. I think there's a big future for it. In many ways, it ties in to machine learning, AI, and that's why I have all these circles overlapping each other. I think we're going to see a lot of things tied together to become meaningful for learners. AR and VR, so that's augmented reality, virtual reality. That's also something where we have a current state and a future state. Current state is that virtual reality is probably on the wish list of your kids' Christmas wish list. And you may have to go out this December and purchase a PlayStation virtual reality set or one of the other virtual reality pieces of hardware that you can get. And so that is here already. I've tested it for learning, and I can definitely see where it's relevant in some places. Personally, in my learning organizations, we focus mostly on skill development. We're talking about role-based learning, so we do leadership, sales, project management, product management, and all of these different roles that you see in an organization. And for that, I felt it just wasn't quite ready. I had to reboot a million times, even with some experts out helping us out. It felt to me like we just weren't right there. Where augmented reality was a little bit closer, I think. And it seems to be moving also faster. I think that by the end of this year, everyone in the world will have tried or at least know about augmented reality. And I say that because the new iPhone X and iPhone 8 are coming out, and they all deploy augmented reality very heavily. In the beginning, it may be difficult to see how that will help us out in terms of learning, but I don't think it takes too much imagination to see that there is certainly something here. You know, the idea that you can point your phone at something and it will immediately explain what is that. That is I think, where augmented reality is going. For virtual reality, it may be even cooler. There's something called digital twins that's being developed right now. A digital twin is basically a full blueprint of something, including how something works and how it doesn't work. So, for instance, you can have a digital twin of a 787 Boeing. What that means is that there's a computer program that has every little thing that goes into that airplane. It has it depicted so that you can take your VR goggles on and you can walk in there. And not only will you be able to look around, but if you touch something, you will be able to interact with it. So for instance, you will be able to install a computer into the digital twin and see how it behaves. You will be able to remove 5 bolts and see if the fuselage gets more or less rigid. You'll be able to fully interact with this digital twin in virtual reality. And so that's interesting, obviously, because it's scalable. It's not just cool, but it's scalable. Suddenly, you don't have to have a full-scale 787 to train the technical people who build it, who maintain it, and all these things. You just need your virtual headset and a few tools. So I think virtual reality is definitely going somewhere. Finally, artificial intelligence, I think that's going to be perhaps one of the most fundamental influences on learning technology. And I don't presume to know where we're going with this. You know, when we say artificial intelligence, some of us who like sci-fi, we think about HAL 3000, we think about the Terminator, we think about living computers, robots, things like that. And while that may happen, and I have no idea what that's going to do to our society, but before that happens, and right now, AI in this context typically means recommendation engines. So when you go to Facebook and you see an ad for something, let's say I see an ad for a lawnmower. It was probably because I did a Google search for a lawnmower or an Amazon search for a lawnmower or something like that. And then Facebook says, well, we're going to recommend these ads to that guy because he seems to be interested in lawnmowers right now. It's also the way that Netflix tries to figure out what do you want to see and makes recommendations to you. It's what Amazon does, it's what Last.fm does, what Pandora does, what Netflix does. It's what all of them do. And so basically for us, what it means is the personalization of a learning experience. That when you go into either your LMS or any of the other learning platforms we talked about, the content there will be made specifically for you, presented for you. So that is already possible today. Saba has Tim, and a lot of the other guys also have these recommendation engines. I think definitely the experience platforms like Decreed and PathGather, they will curate content for the learner. Going forward, it will be even more advanced. Not only will it present you with different pieces of content in terms of different courses, but it will, like I said, grab content from different places and then create a customized course for you, a personalized course for you, or personalized learning experience. So I think AI is probably going to be the biggest deal in learning in the future, combined with natural language processing, the adaptive learning technology, as well as AR and VR. So that was all I had for you today. I hope you found it interesting. I am myself just trying to keep up with this area, and I'd love to talk more to all of you in the coming days. Thank you.